Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Anand Murthy Raj, and this is our first podcast with a very unique concept called Leadership Flow. The tagline is Lead with Purpose, Flow with Impact, and Change that Lasts. You must be wondering why is that you have a word flow suffixed to leadership. To explain this concept, I want you to go to a place like Palestine or Israel now. There is a river called River Jordan. The River Jordan flows from north to south. The termination of the river is generally called the Dead Sea. Well, to be honest, it's not a sea, it's just a lake. But the water there is about 37% of salt. You are not going to drown in the water. But something very interesting is there is not even a blade of grass about 15-20 kilometers around the Dead Sea. There is no life in the Dead Sea. There is no flora and fauna. Just 75 kilometers to the north, you have a very famous place called the Sea of Galilee. And this Sea of Galilee is heaven. It's got enormous amount of flora, fauna, different types of aquatic animals, different types of flowers, different type of vegetation there. So I was always wondering why is that the Dead Sea doesn't have anything, but 75 kilometers to the north you have Sea of Galilee with everything. The answer is with the word flow. The Sea of Galilee doesn't hold anything to itself. It enables flow of water, whereas the Dead Sea holds everything to itself. And that's why we chose leadership flow. The first episode today is about why transformations fail. And I have a very special guest who's going to be a part of this podcast. Let me introduce you a very short introduction. He is Eelco Rustenburg, one of highly respected business agility transformation coaches in Europe. He is the first safe practice consultant trainer of Netherlands. Something that will surprise all of you is that he is the co-author of the book, The Power of Scrum. And guess who the author is? The other author of the book is none other than Jeff Sutherland, the brain behind the Scrum framework. Eelco, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Anand.
Can you please introduce yourself to our audience today?
Yes, always a good question to do, how to do that. So I'm Eelco, I'm 55 years old. I'm a Dutch guy. I'm living in the Netherlands, in Europe. And I've spent 27 years of my life in smaller and bigger transformations, starting with small startups and failing and stumbling and getting back up, and then taking the lessons from these, getting into bigger organizations. And for the past 20 years or 17 years or something like that, I've been involved in really massive transformations like ASML, Philips, Air France KLM, really big enterprises that span multiple countries. I've been involved in the transformation of teams into agility and the leadership and processes and structures around them. So that's been a privilege to be in. I'm the father of 4 kids, so 13, 14, 15, 16, talking about big transformations. That's also a big transformational pattern for myself, I guess, Anand.
Thanks, Eelco. Well, I would like to ask you a few questions. And the first question would be, you've been the driving force behind many successful agile transformations. In your experience, what is the number one reason most transformations fail?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, if I look at transformations and why they, fail or stumble or crash or something, is that they start with lots of energy. And we often say that leadership support is one of the key ingredients to a successful transformation. And when I look back at the beginning, that's almost always somewhat there. They're paying the bills. They're hiring consultants. They're educating their people. They're investing. They're spending time in all these kinds of transformational aspects. The thing is that I think that, and this is something When you want to look at this, I call this muscle memory. So when a transformation is going, the idea of leadership, if this is something that ends, and that end game, that end target, is when the change is visible. Now, if you look at the same thing with people and their emotions, and if you want to make a change in your behavior, you can make that change. You can stop smoking in a couple of weeks, and then you stop smoking. Now, what leadership of big enterprises typically does is, no one is smoking anymore. Transformation is done. Now, what happens typically, because of the lack of attention in this really difficult period where people need to kind of stick with the new way of working, stick with the new direction, stick with the new journey towards a new culture, making it part of culture rather than just process. In that period, the attention span of leadership goes down. And that means you get a lashback. Basically, the transformation kind of falters and stops. And then you seeing some trouble. And that's where leadership starts to take control again and starts to instill traditional, counterintuitive, and counterproductive measures to aid the production and execution, halting the transformation. This is the pattern that I keep seeing when I look at failed transformations, for lack of a better word, of failed, because I always think it's like a state or something. Transformation is an ongoing thing, because you're probably going to take like a couple of years before you really can say, I really quit smoking and I don't feel like having a cigarette anymore. That's the same pattern.
That's a great example. Can you share a story where you witnessed transformations fail despite having the right tools in place? What was that key missing ingredient?
What was missing? What is the key ingredient? I think it's a little bit of the same, but maybe a little bit different. So if I look at one of the big clients I was working with, the leadership gave us like a carte blanche to make changes and to make change happen. And we were growing towards a system where we had like 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 people in transformation making it happen. And then the same leadership was kind of saying, oh yeah, that's going great, but they didn't step into the boat. So they weren't, all the right tools, everything was there. There was budget, there was change, there was momentum. We had all the parts covered, like portfolio management, leadership development, and all these kinds of things. The thing was that from a top leadership position, we basically stepped into this trap ourselves. If I'm going to be really honest, it's a matter of if you go to a leader and he says, "Can you change my company?" The first thing you should say is, "Yes, of course. Can I start with you?" And the most seen reply to a question like that is, "Oh, cool. Of course I can, because this is my specialization. I love this. I love this work. I love this. This is my passion." So we tend to forget that the person who asks is part of the game. And it's the same pattern of stopping smoking again, because then the top is still smoking when the rest is trying to quit. Well, that's going to be really difficult from a lead by example kind of thing. And then you also start to see that they don't take ownership of the new way of working that you're implementing in their organization. And they say, yeah, you're doing great, keep going. And we actually forgot to say, wait, this is too easy for you. Change needs to be uncomfortable, because otherwise you're not making change. You don't have any incentive to change. So I think that's one of the things where I saw something that everything was right and we still missed something.
Yeah, great. I remember in one of the conversations that we had, when a question was asked to you about RACI chart, you made a beautiful statement saying that in an agile world, creating RACI chart is creating racism.
Yes.
You want to spend a couple of minutes on that?
Yeah. So I think this was coming from, I was doing a transformation, and in this case, the people sent me like a big Excel sheet with the RACI, and I felt like this is wrong, because this is causing the wrong behavior, and this is setting the wrong boundaries, and it kind of causes people to stay within their boundaries. And then I said, this is wrong. And then somebody said, I'm not sure, because it's good to have role clarity. And I couldn't really get an argument for that. So I started looking on the internet and actually found an interesting article that said, stop the racism, with the RACI in the racism being like capital letters. And it kind of compared, it was quite interesting it kind of compared RACI to scientific slavery, which I thought was a beautiful way of saying it. And it's actually true. It's a room to hide. It's a room for excuse. It's a room to incentivize like this compartmentalized behavior. We say, well, this is my job, and then I hand it over, and it's out of my responsibility because this is Meraki. So it actually incentivizes people to stay out of collaboration, out of challenging each other, out of caring for each other. So these three really important things of organizational context, doing things together, is incentivized to kind of be more like a contract if you implement RACIs to the extreme, which is, I think, a great insight I had.
Yeah, that was a very nice acronym, and I can't forget that. You've seen a lot of transformations, both at an org level and at a personal level. What do you think is the most common challenge people face when they're trying to adopt to change, both professionally and personally?
It's a tough choice between two things. So, for one, if I also look at myself, being right is one of the challenges. If you say, ask me, so here's 100 people, this is how they work, they want to move into something else, what do you think? Then immediately my brain kind of jumps up and says, I know. They need to create a train and a tribe and a this and that. I know what to do, which incentivizes me not to learn anymore, not to think anymore, not to take anything serious anymore. And if they say, yes, but that's not going to work, but because, then I would say, no, 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 no. I would argue. So being right means that I'm not open to listen to concerns, to options, to what if I'm wrong. So it makes you over optimistic on one hand and blind for errors on the other hand. So this is something that I think is in there to say, well, this is a personal trait. If you want to kind of make transformation happen, both professionally and personally, being wrong is really a really important challenge, because you need to put yourself into this vulnerable place that I don't know. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity, but this is something that people struggle with a lot. I was thinking about another one, but now I think I'll stick with this one, because I think this is the most relevant challenge that you would have if you want to make a transformation happen. Maybe the other one is resilience. Keep going and don't let go. So let go of your old habits, but keep going. So I love when leaders say, look, we're going to do this. We're going to stumble and fall, and then we're going to get back up again and try again. So seeing failure as learning rather than as a we should stop or this is not working. Failure is learning. That is one of the wonderful things or challenges also that you see a lot of people working with. Agile doesn't work for us because in an XYZ. It's okay. So what are you going to do about it? Great, we've learned something. So that's the second part, probably.
I
For
think
me,
this reminds me of a statement which says, there's a world of difference between failure and failing.
yes.
There's a world of difference between failure and failing. Yeah. Why do you think? Why do you think the organization and leaders do not want to come to that vulnerable position of failing? What are the key mindset challenges that they have?
Well, yeah, if I'm completely honest, I think it's because we've created organizations that have a very masculine type of hierarchy, even if there's lots of females inside, but it's like the energy and the way of looking at this. And this is kind of what I've also personally had as a father. You tend to want to be the example for your kids. A mother is far more balanced in that matter for taking care and be an example and letting them learn, etc. So they're far more comfortable with that failure thing. A dad has, I don't know why, it's maybe it's me, just I don't know. I don't want to be gender offensive, but this idea of I want to show how it's done. I need to show them that it's the right way. Is also part of a leader. So a leader needs to kind of balance, which is freaking hard, between this is the way to go, no doubt. And at the same time, I don't know. It's so you need to say we're going, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. And you need to do that with a certain balance and certainty and calmness in your system to make people feel like, okay, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we know what we're doing. And that's a really difficult balance. And I think this is why leaders are struggling so much with this, because it is hard. And you need life experience, and you need to kind of get some grit, and you need to fall a few times to say, okay, it's okay to fall. I remember when I went skiing the first time, I was really afraid to fall. And that made my skiing really tight. I have to do this right. I have to show that I can ski. And the moment I fell, and I realized it's just a fall. I can get back up and ski on, and it's quite an experience. When you start to embrace that, your skiing improves by 200%. You may fall here and there, but then you can have a smile and laugh about it and say, okay, I fell. What did I learn from that? So I think it's a growth moment, but this is really hard for starting leaders, young leaders. If you're maturing, you get a little bit better. But I think that's one of the reasons that you see a lot of this tightness. Like we have to make it work. I have to show that I'm not afraid. But not being afraid is actually saying it's okay to fall. I'm not afraid to fall even. So including that failure into your calmness and into your certainty is a growth moment.
I can quote a very similar example. A few days back, I mean, a couple of months back, I think, in one of the dams in South India, the gate washed away because of high water pressure.
Mm.
And water is supposed to be the most flexible element on planet Earth. But the amount of strength it has is only experienced when you see the floodgate getting washed away in the dam. So being flexible is not a sign of having no strength. It's actually a
Yeah.
sign of having more strength.
Yes.
Right?
But this is a learning that you need to grow into, and I think that we are being taught in many bad ways, by our conditions and our parents and our managers and our leaders and whatnot, that strength is shown through resilience and I know what to do and be certain. So be uncertain is a type of leadership that is not very if you look around you, which means that it's if you compare yourself, you go, I want to be like that leader. Then basically you're saying, I want to be that certain. I want to. But now we start to see, I recognize this a lot because if I look at moments in my life where people say, look, they called me up after a vulnerable moment and said that was the biggest piece of leadership I've seen in a long time. And I was surprised. I was almost crying at the time. I was like, I don't know what to do anymore, guys. I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. And that's where people say, wow, that was some leadership. And I was like, what? I felt really weak. No, that was really strong. So I think this is the insight that we need to kind of carry a little bit further to kind of bring leadership to a higher level of transformation. This is really transformational leadership.
Elko, now that you've worked with a lot of countries and a lot of clients, do you think the culture of a nation plays a big role in this kind of a leadership behavior?
Yes and no, because ultimately I know that I've been studying neuroscience in the past years, and I try to figure out how do people respond to change and to things and etc. And then I noticed that people have pretty much the same kind of models. You know that some cultures are more masculine in their how to deal with leaders and parents and whatnot and parenting styles, and so a culture has an impact. But if you look at the foundation below that, there's actually everybody loves to see a strong leader being vulnerable, saying, guys, I don't know what to do anymore. I need your help. Whether you're in China or on a human level, we understand this. At a cultural level, this is sometimes unacceptable or something that is not doable or something that is being frowned upon. This is basically the insecurities of a certain culture. And every culture has its own insecurities that build this less human part of our leadership styles.
Okay. Uh, Again, we've spoken about this. Leadership plays a huge role in the success of any transformation. Uh, what are those top three leadership traits that can make the biggest difference when navigating through such complex changes?
If you look at the bigger scale, then I think I would choose radical candor first. So being radical in your candidness about things being good or wrong or right. Saying this is what we're heading for. So being really resilient in your this is the direction, which is I think the visionary part of leadership. This is what we're going, and there's no way back. I think that's a clear thing. And then you need to kind of say the next step is to say we accept failure as learning, we embrace failure as a way to learn faster, but we're not going back. We have to move forward. If we keep doing what we did, we will get what we had, which is why we started the transformation in the first place. So this kind of resilience to the goal and to the we are moving, and then we don't know what exactly we're moving towards. That acceptance, that embracing of this uncertainty of the future, that's a leadership's thing because that's the hardest thing for people to do. People stay in relationships for years after they're really unhappy because they rather have the misery of today than the uncertainty of a beautiful tomorrow. That's the weird thing of how our brain operates in these kinds of times of uncertainty. So a leader needs to kind of say, we're going, because otherwise the group won't move. I had a wonderful story. A friend of mine, he had 80 horses who broke out and they were all around the village. And then he came there by himself and the police was there. And he says, you need to get these horses back into your place. And here you are all alone. I was expecting you to bring like an army. And he said, no, no, just watch this. And he kind of had his bread up and he kind of signaled with the bread and he called the leader. And when he called the leader, like he always does, all the horses like they all knew, there's food. And they start to run towards him. And now he knew, now I need to start running and I have to keep going. I have to keep going. The moment I stop, they all lose their interest and they're going away again. So I need to kind of keep the momentum going by running ahead and keeping the resilience that we're going. There's no going back. So he said, I was exhausted by the time I came to the place. I even had a moment where I jumped on the horse itself, and it was kind of like trying to get me off because I was exhausted. I couldn't run anymore. And this is how we got to the area, and I could close it. And the police really said, like, I've never seen something like it. Just you read up there, and the whole crowd starts to follow you. So I think from a leadership perspective, that's an interesting lesson. If you have momentum, if you're going, the direction is going and there's no stopping. You may change direction, you may make changes and adapt, but going is going. If you say there's a PI event, as an example in SAFE, if there's a PI event 6 weeks from now, then don't send a mail 3 weeks later saying, oh, we're delaying it by 2 weeks because we need more time. That's really a killer for whatever is happening. So this is a simple, practical example of the same lesson.
Great. I remember the reading a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. In this book, the author Jonathan Haidt says that change is possible when the whole organization is like a big fat elephant, and you have to motivate the elephant to move forward. There is a human and an elephant. The leader is the individual, and just imagine an elephant standing next to you. Just look at the disparity in the height and weight of these two individuals. So the elephant is highly emotional in nature, the human is highly rational in nature. So he says change can only happen when the human sits on the elephant so that they get a clear vision of what they're going, and and the role of the leader is to clean the path so that the elephant don't get any kind of um, any kind of distraction. The
Yeah, so,
motivation continues
yeah,
to change. Yeah, that
yeah,
was a wonderful example of horses.
yeah.
So a couple of more questions. What advice would you give to young leaders who are struggling to align uh, their personal growth to the organization's agile growth?
Yes. The interesting thing is, if you look at leaders, if you ask them, would you like to have a coach that would help you in your personal journey to kind of reflect on your own behavior, to learn, to kind of embrace this, to talking about your vulnerabilities, your uncertainties, then they all say, yes, I'd love that. And if you ask the same group of executives, etc., so do you have a coach? But 90% of them says no. And then you start asking, why not? And they said, well, I can't find anyone that I can connect to. So I think this has to do with this business acumen. And I think that if I would give any advice to leaders, well, in general, not only the ones that are struggling, is to just have a coach. And also, if you're the type that is a triangle, you'll try to find a triangle as a coach. But it might be more interesting to say, let's have somebody who's more a circle. I had a wonderful comment from one of the Dutch Army pilot Navy. She's a commando. It's a lady, and she's in the commandos in the Dutch Air Force, and she's flying helicopters. And in her training, she had like 50 or 60 commandos being trained to be like a Green Beret. And she said, we all get a buddy assigned. And I got a buddy assigned to me that was dreadful. I hated that guy. And he hated me. We were this was really bad. And then she went to the commander and said, look, there's 50 guys in here. Can we swap? Because this is the most terrible combination that you've made. And the commander only said one thing. He's got a mother that loves him. He's got friends at home. Make it work. And I think that was wonderful, it was for her also like an instrumental moment. And I realized, like, if as a leader you can say, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to invest in this coach to make this work for me, I think that will be a very, very valuable choice to carry on. I've coached many executives, and with some you click, and with some you don't. But for them to allow more coaches into their lives would be kind of a really stepping stone for their personal growth. And that would help them tremendously in helping their organizations to grow further. So I think, get a coach and start taking this seriously, this personal growth, because you're leading typically 1,000, 2,000 people. And then if you look at the amount of education or coaching or reflection they have and the time they take for that, it's really somewhat shallow, right? You're lucky if you find an executive that actually has 2 hours per week reflecting on what he is doing himself to his leaders and his people. That's actually not something they do a lot. And maybe start with your spouse if you want. That's maybe an idea.
Okay.
Anand, maybe before I know maybe you have another question, but I'm also wondering about you. In your, if you've also you've had your fair shares of transformations. You've done many great things and wonderful things. We've done some together. Have you ever thought like, oh, this might not work, this is never going to work, and how did you respond to that? How did you turn it around or something?
Uh, I've not had an opportunity to turn it around yet, but definitely I can reflect back to say an experience where within 3 months of my engagement, I started to get a feeling that this will not work. I think the biggest reason is lack of ownership with respect to transformation. There was not one person with whom we could have connected to explain the problems. Like everybody, everybody said they own a piece of the pie, but nobody knew where the pie was. That was the problem I had. I think the second important challenge I had was that as long as things started off, I saw a lot of interest in the leaders, but I think having interest will not help in transformation. We need to have a commitment. So the difference between commitment and interest is commitment is that I do not want to find any reasons why transformations will not succeed. So I just want to make sure that it succeeds. Well, we may have 100 reasons for 100 blockers, but we will break all the blockers and move forward. That's commitment. Interested is, well, I want something to work. Well, I know it doesn't work because of these reasons. So I see a lot of people who want to get uh, quick wins. They want to see results in 3 months. An organization that is like 100 years old, trying to
Hmm.
change the culture, and results should come out in 3 months. I think that equation doesn't play in any organization.
Yeah.
uh, there is an opportunity for us to now to relook at the whole transformation and fix certain problems. But I think the first thing that I would like to do is ask who is the most important stakeholder that I need to work with. And if you cannot give me one name, goodbye, I'm not coming to this transformation.
Yeah. So without a clear goal or sponsor or these two things, then why are we changing in the first place? It's actually connecting to a story. When I came into one of the big companies, a big chip manufacturing company, they are quite successful, like thousands of people, ahead of the competition, big profit margin growth, everything is there. And then I was asked to kind of help them to become agile. And the first question I started asking, why? Why would you change anything? What's the reason? Because if I don't know why you're changing this, you're looking like you're pretty successful so far, and here I am with my small consulting firm. Who am I to kind of say to you that you're doing bad? It would be like going into Apple saying this is a mess. It's kind of a strange situation that you kind of create. So they said, yeah, but agile seems like a good idea. I said, no, 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 no. I mean, it's not a buzzword. You read it in Harvard Business Review, and then let's try it. That's a crazy idea. So, but when I started looking around, I started noticing that there was actually people complaining at the coffee machine, which led us to kind of see, this is where the problem lies. So if you can articulate that problem, then you also find the sponsor, as you said, because then you say, yeah, that's a problem. That's what I want. And then you get a more clear goal of, okay, this is why we're doing a transformation in the first place. And then you can start probably doing your transformation. Yeah, I recognize that a lot. Thanks. Thanks for that story.
I think the purpose is very important. If you do not know why we are doing this transformation, I think we miserably would fail. Purpose is where we need to have a clear purpose, goal. There has to be clear measures of what is, how do I look like 6 months from now, 1 year from now? How should I look like? If we can draw that picture first and then come back and rework, I think we'll be able to. I'm not going
Yeah.
to say that it's the silver bullet, but I think it is definitely a bullet to
Yeah.
solve many.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's one more thing that came to mind actually. I was thinking about this because if you look at, if you look at transformations, there's often people say, yes, we want to get faster and better. We want to agile. And then okay, so we're going to change. And they said, no, 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 don't change that. Don't change that. We're going to have project management. We're going to have this. We're going to have that. And we want agile. Yeah, but it's two different patterns. So you either do it or you do it the old way. And they said, no, 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 we want best of both worlds. I will never forget this. And I said, well, if you're aiming in a transformation of best of both worlds, you'll get the opposite. You get worst of both worlds. I've even had a case where I was doing a big SAP project that was trying to, and they said, "Yeah, you're the agile coach. You need to make this agile." I said, "Okay." And there was a system integrator that was having their own delivery model, and then there was the client who was doing their own project organization. At a certain time, I'm like, "What am I doing here? I'm trying to marry a waterfall approach to a stage-gated kind of delivery system to a firm that has their own model to agile." So I said, look, I don't know what you want to do. This is not best of both worlds. This is the worst of all worlds. And my advice is to make a choice. Either do it agile with me and then say to whatever firm, say, look, we have our own operating model, we have our own way of working, and this is the guy in charge with the program manager to make it work. Or fire me, hire a waterfall coach, and make this work. That will probably even be better than what we're doing right now. So either way, you win, and then make that choice. Because this is not making sense. It's like pulling a rope from two ends, and two or three equally strong people are doing that. It will never get into any direction. So that was also a thing where you say, well, if you're going to do it for real, at least at the start, to kind of learn what it's about, and then you can start making adaptations. So people typically say, we're going to make adaptations immediately, which means the whole change is going to be kind of like unmeasurable in terms of did it work? So this is another thing. So yeah, start simple.
Yeah. I think the other challenge that I've seen, Elko, is you're trying to do a transformation as a change management process. Right? The word transformation itself means that it's both mind and body has to change. But change is only happening to some external parts of the body without internalizing a few things. That is not sustainable over a period of time. I think for me that could be the one of the reason. I always say this that Rene Descartes in his statement, he said, "I live, comma, because I think I live." So he separated the thinking process and the living process. I think that's a big mistake. And also the metrics, how they measure what I say is a metric, an individual's height, shadows length is measured at morning 8 o'clock. The individual's shadow is measured at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And again at 5:30 p.m., the individual's shadow is measured. And then they say that, look, in the morning, the shadow was in one direction. In the evening, the shadow is in the opposite direction. And in the afternoon, there is no shadow. Something seriously wrong with you. I think that kind of measurement is also killing many transformations. You don't know what to measure. You don't know how to measure. You try to measure something what you've been measuring all these days,
Yeah.
and we all know my behavior depends on how I get measured. Naturally, the
Yeah, so
behavior.
keeping it simple indeed. So keeping simple things to measure, and I agree with you. And transformation is a term that's igniting things. What we're really looking for is the adoption, because adoption is internalization of things. If you look at also with stress and trauma responses, the same happens. If you want to change yourself to not respond angry when somebody does something to you, you need to first transform yourself to kind of stay calm, but internally you will still be burning when that thing, that trigger is in. That trigger will haunt you for years. So the internalization of the transformation, the adoption of it, saying, okay, I'm really over it now. Really, somebody can jump up and I don't startle and scream internally. I really feel calm. That's a journey that takes longer than what the eye sees. And I remember that we were using the Transformers, the movie, the Marvel kind of thing, as a theme in one of the transformation. And then somebody said, it's actually wrong because the Transformers can also transform back to their old way. That's actually not what we want. So that, I think that was a nice way to kind of describe this pretty directly. Like this is only superficial change. The transformation itself is the starting point. This is also why it fails, because leadership's like, great, I have a transformed thing, and then it slowly transforms back. There's a wonderful exercise that I've played with teams even, where I say to the team, okay, form groups of two, and then stand with your backs to each other so you don't see each other, like this, right? And then make a change to your appearance, like unbutton one thing or put one thing up here, like this. And then I say, and then turn around and then see if you can see what the other person has changed. And some people will be really radical, they're the clowns, and some are more like the detectives. They try to trick you into not finding it. They only like change one little thing. And then people do that exercise and it's fun and they're laughing and everything. It's okay. Exercise of now, then people say, okay, we can sit down again. Now, most people will then do this, right? They come to put it back. And then I say, well, this is the actual point of the exercise. Without saying anything, you decide the transformation is over. Let's change back to what we had. And it's a wonderful exercise to make this point really vividly clear. You can do this in a PI event or something like that, like to show people this is how difficult it is to adopt a change, to stay with one sleeve rolled up the whole day, which is weird. It's strange. It's new. So I think that's a wonderful kind of explicit exercise to show change and transformation and adoption. Yeah.
That was a fantastic example, and I'll use this. I have a few quick rapid fire questions for you. If you're ready, I'd like to ask you. There are about 7 questions. Right? Okay, if you could have one superpower to help you lead transformations, what would that be?
The the superpower to see that I'm wrong,
Hmm.
because I often move on thinking I'm right.
Okay, interesting answer. Yeah. Okay. What's one personal habit or mindset change that took you the longest to adopt?
Fixing it myself. So I jump in and I say, I know how this works, and I take too much ownership. So basically, there's many groups and organizations that say take ownership is a big thing, and we need to take ownership. And then I said, really? So from a leadership perspective, I would translate it into something different. How is this organization? How good are you in giving ownership? That's an interesting question for leaders. So if you want your teams to take ownership, it needs to be given, because if you hold on to it and you take ownership as a leader, well, most teams are not going to grab it from their leaders' hands. That's a really difficult thing to do, right? There's hierarchy involved, and stars and stripes and dominant figures. So taking some ownership from your hands is going to be one of the toughest challenges. So give ownership is probably a better approach to getting this done. So for me, taking ownership and sitting on my hands was the most difficult thing that I had to change, and it took me a really long time to adapt to that and say, okay, I will pretend I don't know. That's the best thing I can do. I don't know. It's good question.
Yeah, that's a very good insight. If your leadership style were a book title, what would it be?
Be humble and fearless.
Be humble and fearless. Okay. Um, what's the one tool you can't live without when managing a transformation?
Oh, there's actually two things: my crazy brain and that of my wife. If I'm managing transformation, I need my crazy brain because it brings me all into kind of weird places, and I need my wife's brain to bring me back on earth.
What's one book or podcast that has had the highest impact on your leadership journey?
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange book because it was coaching for human development and performance in sports, together with the chimp paradox, which is two books on how your feelings and your brain system, and your mental system and your body kind of interact, and how you can start to recognize where you are, in what state. That was really helpful for me to start helping people, coaching leaders. There's so many signals that I started to understand because of these two books. And I'm like, this is where this is coming from. This is how I can recognize it. So for me, these two books have been instrumental in my understanding of how transformation really works, because transformation is ultimately a really human thing. We talk about thousands of people, and I remember I was with one of delivery manager in one company, and I was sitting with him and said, this is a pretty big transformation, right? And he looked at me and he said, you know, my child is highly gifted. She's 7 years old, and we have to decide this week whether she needs to go to eighth grade already and be socially behind on the group that she's working with, or stay in the fourth or fifth grade and be intellectually unchallenged and be bored. And she says, that's a big deal. So transformations for people are not these big things. They're really personal things. And if you realize that, you can start looking at the patterns of organizational things and say, okay, 1,000 people is just 10 times 100 people, and 10 times 100 people, and 100 people is 10 times 10 people, and 10 people is a system of people interacting directly. And if I see their nostrils being open, if I see their heads being like stuck or something, then I would say, okay, I need to do something here because there's not the right energy here to get things done. The brain is 30% more effective at positive compared to neutral or stressed. So if that's the game that we're playing, we need to understand people better. So this is why I'm mentioning these two books, I guess.
Okay, that's good. If you could collaborate with any historical figure for a transformation assignment that you would get, who would it be and why?
Well, considering that you're not a historical figure yet, Anand, I would go for Aristotle, because I think his beautiful view on the truth being dependent on the observation rather than it's an absolute truth. That vision of saying the truth unfolds itself while we are describing it, and looking then at organizational science that should be based on this very premise. This is how we do law, how we do education, but in organizational science, we tend to think that it's more Plato side. We're more scientific. There's one truth. This is how you. But if you look at an organizational system, there's all these people, and they're all describing the same organization in their own way, and they're all right. They all create a truth, and then we have to look at, well, the commonality of that. So, well, this is the most seen truth. So this is the direction that we need to take for these people. So having that kind of a vision, that kind of a philosopher next to me in a transformation would be the next best thing to doing it with you, Anand, because that's still something that I still look back to really enjoying it. So if I had to choose anything, then I would do that again rather than this one.
I remember reading the book Reinventing Organizations. The whole book starts with a small story about a big mistake that Aristotle had done in his life. He made a statement once saying that the number of tooth in a man's mouth is greater than the number of tooth in a woman's mouth. And this statement was believed to be true till 800 years, until a question was asked by a small girl who asked, "Shall I count?" So people thought that Aristotle can never make a mistake. And then he says, this is how people see leadership now. Leaders can never make a mistake, and they just blindly follow the leader without even making a thought whether the statement is true
Yeah,
to its existence or not.
beautiful.
Yeah. So this is the last question for the day. Uh, Again, you answered this already. If there is one person with whom you would love to work in the next assignment, who would that be?
Well, I don't have to answer that right now, right? It's well, well, I've always enjoyed how we work together. So if there's any chance of getting back into that kind of game and enjoying our time together, I think, well, talking about that and thinking about that on a more serious note, if you look at transformation, this journey, I think you either start with a friend, but you or not, but you will always end it with a friend, because it's a journey that kind of is through thick and thin. I always compare it to the Lord of the Rings, Sam and Frodo going in this journey. At the end, you're bonded like for life. I With most of the transformations I've done, I really have deep relations with the people that I've done it with, whether it's from Philips or ASML or Air France KLM. Some people even joined our company because they said, "Look, we've had so much fun. I'm going to do this together with you now." So I think that's saying something. And this is also why I would answer it like, well, with you, of course, or it's something because that's, ultimately life's too short to do these kinds of things and then not having a deep relationship. I think, yeah, you're going through the mud together, you're failing together, you're laughing together, you're stressing together, you're beating each other up, you're being radically candid about each other's kind of, well, flaws and everything, which makes you all better. So if there's an opportunity to do that, I would definitely grab it.
I just want to draw a small analogy with the journey of transformation with respect to the journey of the flight that we travel in flight. Initially, there is enormous amount of enthusiasm. You can feel the energy and trust. But once the flight takes off, it looks like you're actually not traveling. You can't really know the speed, right? You're not traveling. Sometimes we look that we are lost, but you'll realize the speed when the flight actually when the wheels hits the ground again, and then when the pilot puts the brake, then we realize the speed in which we were traveling. So that's the transformation.
Yeah, yeah. So now that you say that, there's one story that pops to mind, and maybe to kind of and for my part, we were in a transformation and with a team, and the team wouldn't get any recognition, and we were kind of angry about that because we were working really hard and we were getting good results, and we were kind of, making it happen, and the leadership wouldn't recognize us. They wouldn't say, "Hey, great, your guy's doing awesome," etc. They were paying the bills and everything. So, and then we said something about this, and one of these leaders, amazing, he said, "Well, consider this: the people who instilled the French Revolution, they never got a compliment for making that revolution happen. People at the time were actually angry with that revolution. They had a fight. But now we look back at that as one of the most historical, relevant moments in France's history. The French Revolution is a big deal. So if you look at you're making change here, nobody likes you. So you have to, kind of create your own recognition in yourself, which is another personal journey of leadership. No external recognition. Here's the recognition. I am doing the right thing. I'm doing it for the right reasons, and I'm helping. I'm bringing this to a better plateau. And if that's there, then you can live with the fact, recognition will come far later when you are already like long gone and say, that was actually quite great. You will maybe hear later, maybe never. So I think that's a good lesson for transformation leaders. If you're looking for reassurance or recognition and these kinds of things, which are outside in external kind of satisfiers, this is not to be expected at all times. So make your own recognition work.
Well, Ilko, that was all I had today. But last one, if you want to share one word with respect to this transformation, one word, if you want to kind of make that very an impactful word, what would that one word be?
Vulnerability.
Thank
I
you.
would say that. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I enjoyed. In fact, I never realized how it's 52 minutes since we
Yes,
started conversation. So we were in a state of flow. So, any
absolutely.
questions from the audience? I don't see any questions. Um, okay.
They jump in. Yeah, leaders don't allow teams to fail and learn. They jump in and try to prevent failure and learning. Inundate on about it with a mess.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a great comment. It's a recognized pattern. Often I say, like, if you look at the forming, storming, norming, performing pattern of team development, then I often say, management is actually incentivizing teams to stay storming because they stop the storm. So basically, they say, "Oh, there's something going wrong." I step in and say, "No, no, we need to be professional here. We need to kind of be constructive, and we need to be." So they kind of intervene at a time when the storm is needed to get to a higher level of norming and therefore performing. So that means that most teams kind of get stuck in this everlasting kind of storming to norming kind of phase, never being able to get to higher performance, which means that we're organizing for mediocrity. I think this is a great point. If you look at leaders, give them some room, breathe in, breathe out, which is also why I would give a coaching a chance in your leadership, because a coach will ask you, was that really necessary? Wouldn't they have been better off trying to fix this themselves? I think that's a wonderful chance for leadership to kind of reflect on that kind of question.
Maybe we have one last question that I see in the chat. What is your view on false positive outcomes that will be made early in the transformation?
I made that mistake myself. We were kind of celebrating PI events and community events and whatnot. And I remember that the people in the organization, so if you look at organizational context, people are going through this kind of curve where they kind of like go from the peak of hope into the valley of despair, and then they start climbing back up. If you have people in the valley of despair and your communication says, let's celebrate this great PI event and everything, there's like, what planet are these guys on? They're on a different planet. We are in the mess. We are in the mud. And here they are chanting and celebrating success. So celebrate real wins instead of gimmicks and bullshit. That's the real thing that you need to kind of look for. At the beginning, at the earliest beginning, you need to celebrate something because it gives good energy. It's okay, we got going. This is a starting point. We've taken off. Great. So it's in the analogy of the plane of Anand. When you have taken off and it's in the air, It's also with a rocket launch, you have applause of everybody. We have liftoff. That is a success. And then immediately, okay, and now we need to kind of make sure that we fly and we land, because this is a little bit more important than just the takeoff. So I think that's so false positive outcomes, vanity metrics are kind of things that you say, yeah, yeah, I mean, I understand it, and I see some of it is needed to kind of also shut the negative publicity down. So if you have negative publicity from oh, it's never going to work, then some of it may work. But yeah, the moment you have takeoff, you need to start putting it away and saying, okay, now it's for real. So we're not going to do this again. So use it a little bit and then move on. That would be
Okay.
my way.
So there's one last question before we wind up. It says, can you please repeat the book
Yeah.
names?
The name of the other book is Coaching for Human Development and Performance in Sports.
Okay.
Coaching for Human Development and Performance in Sports. I'm currently reading a book on Aikido as a way of living and improving, which is also a very interesting book. But that's something for later.
Yeah. I think we are almost at the end of the hour. So I really want to thank you for your valuable 60 minutes, probably the best 60 minutes of my life. Thank you very much for the wonderful insights.
Yeah, you too, Anand.
And I hope to
And
see you
thanks,
soon
people.
this quickly. Okay. So thank you very much. I thank all the participants as well here for spending your valuable 60 minutes of your life with us. I think there was a lot of takeaways, and let's catch up in next 2 weeks from now. Let's catch up, and we'll keep you posted on who's going to be my next host. So thank you very much. Let the leadership flow. Thank you.